Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran. We got access to level 120 rogues on the new PvP server on BFA beta. The way that the server works is it puts you in a server that constricts to a zone, mostly outside of the Gladiator Sanctum, where the Duelers Guild is at. The Duelers Guild is a zone where you're running around with a bunch of NPCs. You can pick up your gear, Azeroth bonuses, and choose whatever pieces of gear you want at max level. They got everything from enchants, there's no gems or anything like that, but you got Azeroth bonuses, all the trinkets, PvP pieces, as well as PvE sets that all function in PvP. You could duel each other outside, or you can queue arenas, you can queue battlegrounds, and that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about, is my, I guess, experiences out on the beta today. I got to play all 3 specs of rogues at max level, and I'm here to tell you which specs of rogue are doing great and which ones are not doing all that great. I'll be honest with you off the bat, so far at 120, rogues definitely don't have the sour apple in this one. We have the longer stick. We don't have the short stick in the situation, so that's good. Most of the 3 specs are doing fairly well compared to some of the other classes where one spec might be slamming and the other might not be quite as caught up. Also, I feel like a lot of changes will happen in BFA beta after all these, a lot more people join in and get into trial of these characters. I feel like there's going to be changes to rogues. Not everything works properly, not everything works fine. For example, Subtlety's new talent of Secret Technique only recently got to the point where you could actually use it. It still has a lot of bugs and doesn't render some pieces of the damage, especially like for single target. So that ability on its own could literally make or break Subtlety, because it's basically a beefier version of DFA, but because it doesn't work as it's meant to, it just puts the spec kind of a little bit behind. So not all talents are useful in terms of, you know, actually being functional. Gear also starts to play a huge aspect into this, and I found that later. And overall though, Rogue is feeling, as a class, in a good spot. So if you're somebody who's prepping to play Rogue for PvP, you'll at least find 1 or 2, maybe even 3 specs that'll be useful and viable in order to push rating, whether arenas or BGs, whether you want to just have some casual fun or get serious. Alright, let's talk a bit about Rogue specs. I want to start with Outlaw. Outlaw felt impressive. I personally am impressed. I've been playing Outlaw since Legion, so the new Outlaw in BFA, which is a combination of a combat rogue and an Outlaw rogue in terms of the damage and playstyle of a combat, but the buff mechanic of Outlaw, it flows so well together. And at 120 with full gear, I literally decided to go for a setup already. This simple spec itself and the way it functions, I went for 20% crit, and the rest of the gear I spent into haste. I got a few Azeroth bonuses, but I wasn't really trying to get some kind of crazy bonus whatever. I was just going with whatever sounds like fun. So I applied those. So I was not really all that serious when it comes to putting my Outlaw rogue and trying to do the most amount of damage. And the spec came out to have great sustained damage. Absolutely slamming on sustained damage. If you want, actually, pistol shots actually doing a lot more damage than they used to. So if enemies try to range you, you still got good sustained damage. You don't need to be always meleeing people. Your burst damage is exceptional. The playstyle when you're going for max ham with plunder armor, with, let's say, Thick as Thieves, where Tricks of Trade will give you on a friendly target 50% damage increase with Killing Spear on top of that while the enemy is stunned, especially if you have the crit buff from your Roll of the Bones. Makes for a very potent playstyle in terms of damage. The spec definitely has good burst. So on damage alone, the spec is covered, and then of course there's great CC. Gouge is a great utility. Having a shorter blind if you talent into it is awesome. Having so many stuns to throw around, even though you don't have your artifact weapon to throw nearly as many stuns, having the range for your stuns in terms of your between the eyes, which is a ranged kidney basically with damage on top of it, it feels really good. You have so much control as the spec. You also have great survivability. Like, let's say you're doing some 2v2s and it's a bunch of skirmishes and you're in a situation where you need a lot of self-heal. You lost your artifact weapon, so some of the self-heal capabilities from your artifact weapon are gone. But if you talent yourself properly with honor talents, like for example, if you go for a second healing Crimson Vial, which is basically like a health stone thing that Outlaw can do, and if you go with Iron Stomach, it's such a cool heal combo that makes you actually be livable and live. Combined with CC, combined with good defensives, you can actually survive a lot of the damage. You also are a wild card of rogues, so compared to Assassination and Subtlety, you have Grappling Hook, you have some range to your melee abilities, you have many types of CC on demand, you have a ranged stun. Like, this spec has so many weird things that a rogue normally doesn't. So as a wild card, I feel like Outlaw, compared to the other specs, is definitely going to be one of the stronger specs, and I feel like a lot more played of a spec of Rogue, because it seems so strong and so many people are trying it for PvP and so many people seem to be enjoying the damage that it puts out. Then we got Assassination, and Assassination wasn't disappointing at all. Just because I said I'm impressed with Outlaw doesn't mean that I'm disappointed with any of the specs. Well, I want to say that, but that won't be truthful. Assassination though, one word, solid. Good damage. You just have good damage no matter what. I know that a lot of people were trying to figure out, oh, maybe a poison build would be good. Maybe a bleed build will be good. Maybe I'll go for more of a physical bleed, just not really worry about poisons kind of. It didn't matter. No matter what talent build I went for, if I just follow the playstyle that I set for myself, you do good damage. You want to do more sustain, just a really easy playstyle without too many abilities, you can do that just fine. If you want to go from bleed heavy, some crazy burst wombo combo, bleeds everybody, go rote on literally every entity in the BG, whether it's a pet, whether it's a healer, whether it's a DPS, you can do that. Gear did not matter in this spec. I had haste and crit gear, so for Assassination, not to feel like I have to have master and crit, I literally had haste and crit. So haste added to my ticks of all my dots, allowing me more energy so I can keep supplementing damage. It just felt so good. The spec just worked, and I really like what Blizzard did with it. I feel like it's going to be a strong spec overall, not because it deals good damage, but also because just of how simple it can be in terms of how you want to play. It can adapt to the situation with your talents and honored talents. So in terms of dishing out damage on your own, you'll be just fine. It's also a very hard-hitting spec, so for damage over time ability, you still have a good chunk of burst. Popping that Vendetta on the enemy with a nice Toxic Blade, have a bunch of bleeds rolling, nice Envenom on top of it, you can really just burst someone down. So some specs feeling like, you know, you have to put dots and kind of let them melt over time, the spec still brings a punch when it comes to burst. The spec on its own is a bit low on survivability, so I feel like in terms of BGs with a healer, or in 2v2s with a healer, or 3v3s with a healer to just be there to heal you, I feel that this spec is going to be best with a healer. I don't think it's quite as an Outlaw Rogue who can go for some kind of a wombo crazy build, you know, wildcard of all rogues, and just go for some crazy self-heal. Assassination can't quite do that. You are good at dealing damage and dispatches with the enemy, so I feel like there's going to be something that will secure the spec in terms of arenas, 2s, 3s, as well as battlegrounds. I feel like it's a solid spec, but if you want to play someone with more survivability, Outlaw might be more to your playstyle. That doesn't mean that Assassination can be bad. Let's say for duels, for example, you just won't have exact same insane survivability as Outlaw. Overall, I felt that there's moments where, let's say, a caster just catches me and I'm out of Cloak of Shadows, I'm out of Sprint, I'm out of Vanish, I'm out of every tool. I kind of just get caught out in the open. The only thing I can do is kind of throw daggers to them and hope that the dots melt them before I get melted. So that's kind of why I want to say that this spec doesn't have too crazy on survivability. And finally, Subtlety. And this spec, I don't know how I felt about it, man. That was a roller coaster. It started out very disappointing. Like, really, I was just getting frustrated on stream, like thinking, why is this thing not dealing any type of damage? Why is it not... You know, like, I picked up Outlaw. I barely tried anything with it, and it just did fine. I picked up Assassination. Literally just picked up some daggers, kept the same gear with Azeroth bonuses. I maybe swapped out a few Azeroth bonuses for Assassination, but it just worked like charm. And then there was Subtlety, and that one I just had to put more effort into it. Subtlety was bad at first, but became very, very decent by the very end of it. Gear ended up being a huge factor of what a Subtlety Rogue is about. In terms of mastery, I had to really load up the spec with a bunch of mastery. I had like 20% mastery, and by the time I flipped my gear, I had 2% haste, which meant I got no energy outside of my burst and outside my setups. I had about 20-30-ish% crit, and then 75% mastery. So that's about as good as I could get that spec to be as best as possible. And once I did it, that's where it started kind of fall together. On top of it, I had to also go for specific Azeroth bonuses. This is the first time I actually had to get specific gear in order to make a spec as well as a build work. Subtlety has a few different builds, and the one I went for is the bursty build because that's what I'm used to, and I think a lot of people will end up playing the bursty build at the very beginning. I don't remember a lot of people liking the early Subtlety of Legion, whereas more sustained Shadow Strike spam type of build. So of course I went for the bursty build, but I had to get specific Azeroth bonuses. I had to get specific doubles of certain benefits. So if you're going to be doing some gearing as a Subtlety Rogue, if you are going to be limited by gear, that means you're going to really have to grind those pieces of gear with specific bonuses from specific pieces of content, whether it be raids, dungeons, or whatnot. At least that's how I understand it. Anyway, the spec ended up working pretty well once I got everything together, but I do want to emphasize just how much effort it was just to get everything right, make sure our stats are perfect, make sure the trinkets are perfect, everything was perfect for the spec. It was doing good burst. but you can't have good burst and good sustain with Subtlety. I feel like there's a few talent builds that allow you good burst, but there's also other talent builds and Azeroth bonuses that allow you good sustain. You can't really have both, so you have to choose one or the other as Subtlety. So going with good burst, I decided, hey, let's see how this is. So in a burst setup, it's actually very, very powerful. You can get somebody, depending on their armor, down to about 25% of their health, so you can shave off 75% of their health, which is actually not bad. Of course, it depends, you know, whether they're plate, whether they're mail, leather, or cloth, what character they are, what class they are they a priest with a stackable 30% damage decrease, or are they going to be like a hunter without any kind of stackable decreases of any sorts? Like, what kind of class are we talking about? Do they have a trinket, do they not have a trinket? So the setup of its own, of the playstyle itself, let's say you want to be a Subtlety Rogue, roaming battlegrounds, just one-shotting people, or at least ambushing them, bursting them as far as you can, and then trying to finish them off while they have low health. Well, as Subtlety Rogue, you will be able to do that. But it still kind of gnaws at the back of my mind that you can kind of choose burst playstyle or sustain playstyle, and it's like, you can't have both. And that's one of the things that I just didn't really understand for Subtlety. Yeah, it's just, when you take a look in comparison with Assassin Outlaw doing good on sustained burst, like, no matter what build you go for. But then with Subtlety, you are now trying to have to fine-tune it, and I guess it's going to be fine, and it's something that maybe might make Subtlety a lot more difficult of a spec to play, which is something that Subtlety was very much known for the longest time in previous expansions, and in Legion did it become a lot easier to pick up. Subtlety used to be that spec that either, if you weren't good with your bleeds, and your debuffs, and your energy management and common point management, you couldn't play it. If you were perfect with it, then you could at least, you know, compete. So maybe the spec is going to kind of create its own difficulty coming to BFA, which I think is going to be a good idea in the long run, for one spec to be just extra difficult or have to, you know, get a little bit extra in terms of workaround. On top of it, Subtlety has always been a spec that generally in the history of WoW never had a good start when it comes to PvP or PvE, because it is pretty gear dependent. As better gear gets unlocked in the future, then the spec can really evolve and do a lot more damage, be a lot more effective. It's very gear reliant, and the Blizzard is bringing back gear, especially for PvP. Then I can only see Subtlety become better as we get into the seasons, as the gear gets better, as we get better trinkets, as we get better Azeroth bonuses, as we unlock more Azeroth bonuses. So that's probably the best way of looking at Subtlety. It's good, you can play it, it's fine. I was just very much surprised by the importance of gear in BFA, which I think is going to be something that's going to be fresh for a lot of you guys. For me, I found it a little bit, you know, with the stat templates that we have for PvP, you can just hop on any character, any class, any spec. Doesn't matter even if you have fully capped out artifact weapon, even though by now you really should have it, because they're doing an event in Silithus for retiring your artifact weapon. You should be able to do it by now. But you know what I mean. Didn't matter whether you have enough gear, you can actually go into BGs and for the most part do just whatever. Playing alts for PvP is fairly easy. But when it comes to PvE, I feel that unless I'm keeping up with my Warlock and have best in slot gear with perfect stats, I can't do any damage, even if I'm doing the rotation properly. So I feel like that type of playstyle, where gear does play huge importance in terms of the spec, going into BFA and being applied into PvP is going to be something that a lot of people will find maybe jarring. But I think it's good. I think it's good to go back to having gear be at least some sort of importance when it comes to dishing out damage, when it comes to building your character, when it comes to understanding how to play your class. But I also feel like it might specify a lot of people to just have one main. I thought of BFA for a second and I thought, wow, it would be so easy to have maybe multiple alts, because it doesn't seem like we'll have too crazy of like grindy content. But with how important gear is turning out to be, it might be the expansion where at least for PvP you might be maining one spec or even at most one class for a good chunk of while, until you can build up the gear and the Azeroth bonuses, unless not every spec and class is going to be like this, and it doesn't seem like every spec and class is gear dependent, but some definitely are. But I think the payoff is going to be big. Anyway, just wanted to get you guys your information daily bite on what Rogue is all about for BFA. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think? Overall, I think that all three specs are great. If you're going to be playing Rogue and BFA, I feel like it's looking out to be a good spec, unless Blizzard for whatever reason goes and nerfs us in the near weeks, which is always a possibility. It is a beta. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you guys enjoyed this type of video. I hope to bring you guys more BGs and PvP from BFA now that the 120 servers on Glad Sanctum are available. If you guys do get the beta, join the Glad Sanctum, and if you guys are more than welcome to join me in a couple of skirms, a couple of BGs, more than welcome to just hang out and do whatever. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see all of you in another video.